Hey guys, it's Charlene. Are you ready for some cuteness? I have the Follow That Bunny stamps and dies from the January release for Picket Studios. I have several stamps from the stamp set and I'm going to stamp these out in some black hybrid ink. Once I get a good amount of ink here on my stamps, I'll go ahead and stamp them down. I usually like to stamp 2 or 3 times so that I can make sure I get a really nice solid black line. It's so helpful for when you're coloring. So I'm going to come back in here and I'll stamp this a second time and lift, and I think 2 stampings is probably good. I'll be coloring these with my Olo markers. So I'm going to color the bunnies in a couple of varieties. I'll do a light brown, a gray, and a white. For the light brown bunnies, I'm going to use 4.6, 4.3, and 4.1. For the white bunnies, I'm going to use my warm grays. So I'll keep those in the G0, G1, and G3. Then for my gray bunny, I'm going to increase the intensity of my warm grays. So I'll go more towards WG3, WG5, and probably WG7. I'll start by coloring a brown bunny. I have my 4.6, and I'm going to add a shade line anywhere that I need to indicate that there's something in front. So for instance, I'm going to go along his arm on the top portion because that's going to show that his front arm is in front of his body. And then I'll go underneath his head as well as on the top part where his paw is, because those areas are back behind his head. I'll just do a line underneath his head here on his ears. Then I'll also do a line coming up the rest of his leg. Next, I'll move on to my 4.3. And for the 4.3, I'm going to bring it right along, working it into the 4.6. And I'll bring this up and around his head. I'll do the same thing here on his leg, working it into the 4.6. I'll also bring it as a lighter shading color all the way along the front of his body. So that's a good way to kind of alternate your shading colors. If you want something to be a little bit darker, you can use that as a shading color in lieu of something a little lighter. So like your 4.6 versus your 4.3. Next, I'm going to bring in my 4.1 and I'm going to run that just along the edge of that 4.3 and finish pulling out that color. Once I finish pulling out the 4.3, I'll just color any of the remaining white areas with the 4.1. So here is our finished first bunny. I'll color this bunny using the same browns. So again, starting with the 4.6 and just adding a thin line of it next to anything that needs to look like it is in front of something else. Then I'll come in with the 4.3 and I'll work that right along the edges of the 4.6, pulling it out a little bit. And then I'll bring in that 4.1. Same thing, going along the edges of the 4.3, pulling that out, and then working my way through all of the remaining white space. The only place I'm not going to color is the tail because I want that to be white. So here's our finished second bunny. Next, I'm going to work on our white bunny. So I'll start with WG3, just bringing the tiniest bit of a line in the areas that would be in front of something. Then I'll bring in my G1 and work just along those lines, being really careful to pull it out but not going too far. And then lastly, with my WG0, which is the lightest of those warm grays, I'll add a little shading on the tail, and then I'll work out those areas where I had the WG1. But I'm not going to bring it all the way across the bunny. I don't want to add too much shading. I'll add some of the WG0 under his bum and on the bottom of his foot and the edge of his ear, as well as the edges of his face. But that's the extent of everything because I largely want this bunny to still appear like a white bunny. So here is our finished white bunny. For our dark gray bunny, I'll start with my WG7, and this is a very dark gray, and I'll bring in the tiny shade line again around those areas that would be in front of something else. And full disclosure, I recorded doing all the shade lines, but had my colors wrong. What I thought was the WG7 was actually the WG5, so we're gonna do this all over again because I want a nice gray bunny. So I've got that WG7. I'll work it underneath his tail, and I'm just going to put a little bit here in the areas that would be the darkest. Once I've added that in, I'll bring in my WG5 and again working it right along the edge of that WG7, pulling it out. I'm actually going to largely use my WG5 to color in this bunny, and I might leave a few spots for a highlight with the WG3, but really I want this bunny to have that nice all over gray color. So I left a few spots here. You can see this is where I'm going to put that WG3 in. These are kind of like highlight areas, so I left a little bit there on the front of his face, along the tops of his arms, and then at the top of his paw. I am going to bring my WG3 in a second time and sweep it back and forth over the center of the face. This will help it blend in a little better. And to really get that nice blend, I did a second layer of the grays. That darkened up the bunny, helped it blend a little easier. I think it looks really nice. My bunny ears, I'm going to use RV 0.2 and RV 0.1. I'll start with the RV 0.2 and run that along the inside line of the ear. Then I'll bring in the RV 0.1 and I'll run that right along the edge of the RV 0.2, bringing it down to where our other remaining color was. I'll repeat that for our other bunnies. While I have my pinks out, I'm going to color some of the other elements. So these are kind of like yard signs, or they could be balloons, whatever you like. I end up using one as a yard sign and one as a balloon, but I do want them to be 3D. So I'm starting with my RV 0.4 and bringing it all the way around the edge of the entire bunny image. Once I have the edges done, I'll come in and I'm going to flick out towards the middle from those edges. I didn't flick out from the bottom though. Now I'll bring in my RV 0.2 and I'm going to continue with that flicking motion, blending out from the RV 0.1 towards the center of the bunny. But I'm going to leave a small spot in the middle in order to add a nice little highlight. For the highlight area, I'll use my RV 0.1 and I'm going to flick that back and forth into the RV 0.2. I am going to repeat the process again here a second time. And while I have these out, I'll color one of the Easter eggs. For my next color combo here, I'll bring in some B2.6, 2.4, and 2.2. I'll color this other yard sign in the same way that I did the pink bunny. Some colors you're going to find you need to do it twice in order to get a really nice blend. And then others you'll find that you get a nice beautiful blend with just one go over. I'll do another egg in blue, this time just using the 2.4 and 2.2. Then we'll get some yellow green, some YG 1.6, 1.4, and 1.2. I'll use that for the other large Easter egg. Coloring things so that they look 3D like these eggs and the balloons is actually one of my favorite techniques. My chocolate bunnies here, I'm going to use O4.6 and O4.3, and I'm going to use a lot more of that O4.6 because I want the chocolate bunny to be pretty dark. I'll start by going all the way around the bunny. I'm also going to color around the bow, and then I'm going to flick in from all of those sides. This is going to leave me with just a few small remaining spots that I can color in with the O4.3. For our bunny's noses, I'm going to use the RV 0.2, and the inside of the mouth here, I'm going to use RV 0.1. I'm going to use a little more RV 0.1 on the ears just to build up that color and make it a little more noticeable. I think I'll leave the white ones alone though. For the bow, I'm going to start here with YG 1.4 and I'm going to color towards the center of the bow coming out from that center portion. And then I'll do a small spot right at the base of the bow as well as around the bunny's little palm. The rest I'll color with 1.2 and it's a really small space, so I'm just going to barely go into that 1.4. I'm going to do the same thing for the bow that's on the balloon. So this is what we have so far. We just have our 3 little Easter eggs left to do. These are really small, so it can be kind of difficult to use a lot of colors on them. So what I've chosen to do is use several of the colors that I already have out on my desk and just color in different areas. And because it's hard to shade with those kind of small little areas that are multicolor, I'm going to use a cool gray. So I have my CG3 and I'll bring that around the edges of the center Easter egg as well as along the bottoms. And this is going to give us some nice shading without having to use a bunch of different colors. I've brought in a white gel pen here to dot the little chocolate bunny's eye. I'll bring in RV 0.2 and do a very light dot of it on the brown bunny's cheeks and some RV 0.1 on the white bunny's cheeks. I'm also going to go ahead and bring that back over the brown bunny's cheeks because I felt like they were a little dark, so I'll just dot right over the existing color. Then I'll come back in with my white gel pen and I'll put a little center dot on the cheeks. This creates kind of a nice little accent. I love how this looks. I think I want their tails to be very white, so I've decided to bring in that white gel pen and color in all of the bunny tails. I almost brought in some pom-poms, which is another cute little detail that you can use on bunnies. For our dark gray bunny, I'm going to bring in RV 0.4 for the cheeks because a lighter color just doesn't show up as well with so dark of a bunny. Then I'll do that same white dot. You could add other gel pen accents if you wanted to. I tend not to do too much, but I feel like they look really cute on critters. We finished coloring, so I used some low-tack tape to get all of my dies ready. Now these dies are great because it includes a die for all of the images as well as the sentiments. So I'll go ahead and cut those out. You can see how cute they are. Set them aside. And next I'm going to bring in the Scene Building A2 stencil set, Layers of Adventure. This is great to have in your stash for building up a background. You've got different grasses, you have cloud edges and hill edges, stars, butterflies, lots of different options with this. I'm using my paper inking palette. This is going to help me hold my stencils in place. And then I have a white 8/2 size piece of cardstock here. I'm going to work with this hill. So remember, you can flip your stencils back and forth, so you can use either side. I'm going to start with the stencil above where my topmost hill is going to be. You do want to add a little bit of masking on those inset pieces if you're like me and tend to be a little messy. I have two different greens here. I have a yellow green called aloe vera and a darker green called forest glades. That's going to help us create some definition with our inks. I'm going to start out here with the aloe vera. I'll turn this to make this a little easier on myself, and then I will bring that aloe vera ink just right down from the top of that stencil line, working my way down all the way to the bottom of the page. So I have a good all over here now, and I'm going to bring in that forest glades and get a little bit on my brush, work it into the bristles, and then I'll come down from the top edge of the stencil. I'm not going to bring this down very far, but you'll see when I lift up the stencil, it's going to have a nice little defining line where the top of the hill is. Once you've lifted up, you can either just move it down, or you can flip it over, or you can go left and right. Remember, there's lots of different ways to use these kinds of stencils to get variation. So I decided to flip mine over, and now instead of coming down with that Forest Glades ink, I'm going to go up above the hill with the Forest Glades ink. So now I'll lift this off, and it's going to give us a really nice second hill. I'm bringing in the grass portion of this stencil, and I'm going to put a few little blades of grass here and there. Remember, you don't have to use the entirety of the area of the stencil. So I want my little blades of grass to be a little shorter, so I'm only going to color here and there along the top areas of the blades of grass. I want it to have sort of the illusion that there's grass there, but I don't want to color grass all over my piece of cardstock. So now I'll continue through the different spots on the hill, adding just a little bit of grass here and there. Okay, finished adding grass in different areas. You can see as you pick up and move and shift this stencil, you can make it so that your grass pieces overlap, which looks really nice. Now I've got my masking tape. I'm going to mask right along the edge of the grass. It is a lot easier to use small pieces of tape to do that kind of masking, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Now I'll bring in this nice light blue ink, which is called Iceberg, and I'm going to use this to create our sky. I'm starting by doing a general light all over coloring with the iceberg. Very light-handed, not a lot of ink there, but it adds a nice blue color. Next, I'll come in with the same stencil that we used to do the grass. And you can see you have either these inset clouds or you can do a cloud border. I'm going to use the cloud border. So I'll start by getting a little ink on my brush, and then I'll just gently work my way up off of that stencil area, just like we did with the hills. Take off the stencil and you can see we have our first nice little cloud border going there. I used the stencil 3 times, so you can see now we have that nice beautiful cloudy sky. For the sentiment, I'm going to use the Happy Easter word die, which is really nice. You've got the word die, which all stays together. Love that. And then the shadow die. So I'm going to just use the word die on this card, and I'm going to cut it out here 3 times in black cardstock. And then I'll layer these up together to get a nice dimensional sentiment for the front of our card. I've laid everything out on my card background just how I like it. I'm going to go ahead and pop up several pieces and elements here and there with some foam squares. I didn't do everything. I think that adds a nice little element to a card by having it popped up in some places and not in others. So some areas will be glued directly to the card background. This is the Easter Bunny Sequin mix. You can see there's lots of different lovely pastel springy colors with some sparkly bits in there. So I'm going to pick out some sequins here to add a little bit of bling to our card background. For the inside of our card, I'm using the 2 chocolate bunnies as well as the sentiment. So I'll start by stamping out the sentiment with my black hybrid ink, and I am going to stamp this just below the center of the card. And now I'll bring in those 2 chocolate bunnies, and these are going to go just above the center of the card. They'll be right over the top of the sentiment. I love that there's 2 bunnies here, so you can make it so that they face each other. Really, really super cute. Now I can add glue to our finished card panel and glue it to the card base that we created. So here is our finished card. I can't believe how cute this is with all of those bunnies, and we have our nice little sentiment on the inside of the card, which is really easy to add. All right, guys, I hope that you picked up some tips and tricks today. Please be sure to like and subscribe, as well as hit that notification bell so that you'll know about future videos here on the Picket Studios YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.